The dragon type in Pokemon is one of the coolest typings in the entire game. This is because many of the pseudo-legendary Pokemon end up being dragon type, and not only that, some of the designs are just really cool. But far and above all else, any typing that my goat falls under is automatically considered awesome. But dragon types often take a very long time to evolve to their final forms, so you're kinda stuck with their weaker, obsolete forms for a pretty long time. And with that knowledge, I thought to myself, how hard would a challenge be if I were to only use dragon types? That's why I embarked on a journey on Pokemon Sword, and while using these Hardcore Nuzlocke rules that you see on screen, I sought out to complete the challenge. And so stay tuned, because this challenge is probably more difficult than you actually think. And above all else, I hope you enjoy. We start off our journey as any regular teenager would do in today's day and age, just chilling at home watching YouTube. And we do this until our longtime neighbor and friend Hop decides to show up and asks us to come over. If you've played Pokemon Sword and Shield, you would know that there's a lot of story stuff that's coming up. And since none of the three starters end up being dragon types, it's gonna be a while till we actually get our first starter. And so let's speedrun this really quick just so we could catch up with the story. When we step outside, we see a Wooloo banging his head on a fence. I don't really know why he's doing that. It's kind of stupid and really funny at the same time. From here, we head to Hop's house to meet his mom, and we find out that Leon's back in town finally. So we head to Wedgehurst Station to meet him there. After a brief introduction, we head back to Hop's house, and he gives us a choice of one starter from 3 Pokemon. I pick Grookey because I think he's a funny monkey, and then we find out that Wooloo from earlier, well, he's stuck in the slumbering world now, and so we have to find him. Here we find a mysterious dog Pokemon who is literally invincible. He sends us off after that, and Leon finds us. The next day, we head back to Wedgehurst so we can meet Professor Sonia. She gives us the Pokedex, and right after we head to Magnolia's house where we get wishing stars and hang out with the boys once again. The next day, we head to Wedgehurst Station, and finally off to the wild area where we can find our first encounter. And once we're finally in the wild area, we're able to finally find our actual starter Pokemon for the run. Our first encounter comes from a raid den, since that's the only actual accessible dragon type we have. In Rolling Fields, we find Rathalos the Axew, a cute little fella who will unfortunately be alone for a little bit, but eventually he'll get a little teammate. And since I'm not using Isle of Armor, this will be our only encounter for a little bit. And now it's time to head to Motostoke to do some very important stuff. If you thought that important stuff was the gym challenge, well, you would be wrong, because in fact it's time for a makeover! After getting our hair and makeup done, this is our fit for the gym challenge opening ceremony. By the way, I love the customization in these games. I wish they were in Scarlet and Violet. After this, we head to Motostoke Stadium and meet Bede, who is kind of a bully for no real reason. He's our second rival in this game, and he's like alright. After signing up for the gym challenge, we head to Budew Drop-In, and here we meet the lovely Team Yell. I personally like these guys, but they can be annoying in the story, to be honest. Anyways, we beat him up for a little bit, and then we meet the Queen Marnie. I genuinely love her character, and I love how her and Team Yell mutually treat each other as family. It's the cutest thing ever. Not to mention her story arc and character development is my favorite in the entire game. But that's enough glaze. It's time to commence the gym challenge. The Galar region is so cool because they treat Pokemon battles as like a genuine sport. Like, imagine being in the stadiums and seeing two titans just battling each other and singing along to some crazy ass music. Anyways, it's off the turf field for our first gym battle. But first we have a little run-in with Bede in the Galar mine. He'll be a real problem for us later on once he has his fairy types, but for now, he only has psychic types. After cooking him up really quick, it's off the turf field to start the gym. And here we corral some Wooloo real quick, and then it's time to fight Milo. And once again, I love glazing this game. It's so cool that we walk onto a literal pitch. Anyways, we commence the battle, and he leads with Gossifleur while I obviously lead with Rathalos. I didn't mention it in the intro, but I have one extra rule. I'm unsure if I'll ever do this rule again because I think it simplifies the battles just a little bit too much, but I decided to not allow myself to Dynamax at all, with one little exception. I'm sorry, I know it's stupid, but that exception is not here. Turn 1, Rathalos goes for a Dragon Claw that leaves Gossifleur down at 1 HP. Gossifleur goes for a Round, which does a little bit of damage. Next turn, a Dragon Claw takes down Gossifleur, and out comes Eldegoss. Eldegoss Dynamaxes, while Rathalos just goes for a Dragon Claw that does about a third. And here's where the issues start to arise. I get lucky, and first turn, Eldegoss goes for a Max Overgrowth that Rathalos fortunately resists. But even with resist, this just does way too much damage. We get a teeny bit of recovery from the grassy terrain, which actually pays off pretty well. The next turn, a Dragon Claw leaves Eldegoss at about half HP, while Eldegoss lands another Max Overgrowth. Rathalos survives on 3 HP, but inevitably goes down the next turn. And unfortunately, that's the end of attempt 1. I didn't really have a plan, but it's definitely doable. On attempt 2, Rathalos is female this time, and she also has a plus special defense nature, which is actually pretty useful. I also actually have a plan coming into Milo, so we'll see how it goes. But it's here I realize we have a huge problem. problem. You see, Rathalos' Dragon Claw does significantly less damage than it did before, and this is because her ability, Rivalry, makes her do less damage to Pokemon of the opposite gender, and obviously that makes this battle pretty much unwinnable. When we get to Eldegoss, he takes like literally no damage, and even with a Wiki Berry, we just can't survive. And so attempt 2 ends, and it's the time for attempt 3. This time Rathalos is once again a male and has an insane attack stat. We also did some raid hunting so that we could get the TM for X-Scissor, which Axew can fortunately learn. This means an X-Scissor with a held silver powder is able to one-shot Gossifleur and then 2-shot the incoming Eldegoss even after the Dynamax. And after the last X-Scissor, we finally defeat Milo and we can actually start the run. From here we head to Route 5 where we meet some TL members again and then do a long search in the grass so that we can find ourselves our next team member, Applin. I name him Raihan, and unfortunately Applin's moveset leaves a little bit to be desired. So for a while, he's gonna be a bench warmer for our team. From here we arrive in Holbury where we meet Chairman Rose and Olina while they're on their break. Also at the lighthouse in Holbury we meet Nessa, who has one of my favorite designs in the entire game. And after meeting her, it's finally time to take on her gym. And here's where that one exception will come in. You see, I did this battle before I realized I can use the Watt Trader, so I came up with a plan that was only doable with Dynamax. So please forgive me, but I'll break this rule just one time. Nessa leads with a poopy Goldeen while I lead with Rathalos. Rathalos Dynamaxes right away and gets outsped and gets hit with a weak horn attack. I made sure to give him some Dynamax candy so he can have as much HP for this fight as possible. He then lands a Max Knuckle, giving him an attack raise, but doesn't deal too much damage. The next turn, Goldeen lands another weak horn attack, while Max Knuckle takes out Goldie. Next out comes the Arrokuda, who surprisingly gets outsped and one-shot by a +2 Max Knuckle. Nessa finally sends out her ace, a Dreadnought. At the same time, Rathalos Dynamax ends. But this was planned for. You see, fighting max moves are unique. Typically max moves have higher base powers, but Max Knuckle actually trades off base powers for the plus attack boosts. Max Ooze also does this if you really wanted to know. And so with this knowledge in mind, even after Dreadnought Dynamaxes, a +3 attack 100 base power superpower is enough to take down Dreadnought in one hit. And with that, we obtain the Water Badge. But rest assured, that's the last time we use Dynamax in the entire run. After our little gym scuffle, we head to a restaurant to hang out with Olina, Chairman Rose, and Professor Sonia and talk about some random stuff. And after a good meal, we head to Galar Mine number 2. We find Bede here once again, and really quickly we kick his butt. After that, we find our newest party member, Paolumu the Noibat. His base stats are kinda poopy, so he'll also be on the bench for a pretty long time. And with that out of the way, it's time to head back to Motostoke and face Kabu. I would consider him the first real hard fight that we'll come across in this run. He has a team of 3 fully evolved Pokemon, and I have 3 little baby Pokemon. So in order to win, we're gonna have to use some EV training. After like 200 speed EVs and some attack EVs, we're able to outspeed Kabu's entire team and also be prepared for the battle. I also remember the power of the Watt Trader, which will come into full effect in this fight. Kabu leads with Ninetales while I lead with Rathalos once again. On turn 1, I go for a taunt so that Ninetales isn't able to Will-O-Wisp me. On the next turn, I go for a Swords Dance while Ninetales goes for an Ember. Fortunately, I don't get burned, so next turn I'm able to safely go for another Swords Dance to get to +4. On the next turn, Ninetales shakes off the taunt, but I go for another one right away and cancel another Will-O-Wisp. One last Swords Dance brings me to +6, and then finally it's time to attack. One Dragon Claw takes down Ninetales, and then comes out Arcanine. He has Intimidate, but that only brings Rathalos down to +5, which is still enough for the rest of the battle. One more Dragon Claw takes down Arcanine, and then out comes Centiskorch. He does his really cool Gigantamax, but he doesn't get to land a max move as a +5 Outrage is able to take him down in one hit. And as I'm sure you could tell, this is how most fights will go. But it's fun trying to figure out all the beginning puzzles, but at the same time, it's mostly setup spam, which I think is pretty boring. I think in future runs, I'll probably ban setup moves, but I'll keep Dynamax open on the table. I don't know, you let me know what you want to see. But with Kabu and Motostoke done, we finally have access to the second half of the wild area. And here we beeline it straight to the Digging Brothers. Here we're able to dig up a fish fossil and a drake fossil. This will be useful for a future team member, but for now it's time to catch a new team member. In a giant's mirror den, we're able to catch Geismagorm the Dino. If you know anything about this little guy, it's that he will evolve way later in the game, meaning we're building up quite a squad of bench warmers right now, but I like to think of it as more investing for the future. And now we arrive in Hammerlock, which it's time for some more important stuff. And as I'm sure you guessed, I'm not talking about no damn boring story. It's time for more clothes shopping. And I pick out honestly one of the cutest outfits I've ever made in this game. And now that we're all spiffy, it's time to continue the rest of the story. We meet up with Olena and Chairman Rose once again, who tell us to head to the vault of Hammerlock. But right outside the vault, we find a guy who's trying to find a way to confess his love to his friend. Apparently there's a custom if you give somebody an applin, they'll fall in love with you. So I lend him mine, which he decides to come clean and admit to her that he didn't actually catch this one. But due to this, he actually finds out that she also has feelings for him. How adorable. After promising to catch one himself, he gives us back our applin and also gives me a tart apple. With this tart apple, I'm finally able to evolve Raihan. He turns into a Flapple and will be pretty useful in this upcoming gym. On our way out of Hammerlock, we find Team Meow, who is trying to stay silent so that Silicobra can stay sleeping. But unknowingly, they start a Pokemon battle with us, which is also pretty loud. So after cleaning them up, the Silicobra just ends up waking up anyways. And now that we're finally on Route 6, we're able to revive those fossils that we got earlier and receive the greatest Pokemon ever conceived known to man, Dracovish. But a nickname theme is nothing to them, so I nicknamed them Goat because that's what they are. And lastly, in the Dusty Bowl, we're able to find Baroth the Vibrava. And finally, with our encounters out of the way, it's time to face the Stonewand City Gym, which I have to say, the gym puzzle in this place is so much fun. Some people like to say that this game has no life, and I genuinely want to know what they are smoking. And I guess if it isn't obvious by now, this is kinda my favorite game in the series.
You what?
But alas, enough glazing, I'm sorry. Because it's time to face Bea. She leads with Hitmontop while I lead with Raihan. On turn 1, Raihan goes for a Dragon Dance, while Hitmontop just goes for a failed counter. The next turn, Raihan goes for another Dragon Dance, while Hitmontop just goes for a Revenge that does a little under half HP. The next turn, I risk a crit and go for a third Dragon Dance, but this was necessary so that Raihan can eat the Citrus Berry after tanking another Revenge. With that, Raihan is now holding no item. This is important because now Raihan can use Acrobatics, which is now boosted to base power of 110. This takes out Hitmontop in one hit, and next comes out Pangoro. He too also ends up going down in one hit to Acrobatics, and then comes out Sirfetch'd. He goes for a Detect turn 1, which means he gets to live one turn longer, but unfortunately it pains me to one-shot him the next turn with Acrobatics as I really love Sirfetch'd. Last to come out is Machamp, and while he Dynamax is trying to avenge his fallen brethren, one last Acrobatics is all it takes to one-shot Machamp from full HP. And with that, we receive the Fighting type gym badge. After the gym, we step outside just to find Bede literally committing crimes? Obviously, this doesn't go over well with Chairman Rose, and Chairman Rose disqualifies him from the gym challenge. What a loser, am I right? After this whole ordeal, Rathalos evolves into a Fraxure. This is an important upgrade for our upcoming gym. Speaking of which, it's time to head to Balanlea for probably the hardest battle this entire run. Here we face the gym leader Opal and her fairy types. And as I'm sure you know, fairy types are the hard counter to dragon types, so this one's gonna be a little tricky. Opal leads with Galarian Weezing while I lead with Rathalos. On turn 1, Rathalos just sets up a Swords Dance. Galarian Weezing goes for a Fairy Wind that does just above half HP, proccing the Citrus Berry that Rathalos is holding. Right after this, Opal asks me a quiz question, which I answer correctly, which gives me some stat buffs. Since I'm afraid to take too much damage, next turn I just go for an Iron Tail that has a slight chance to miss, but fortunately we get lucky and it lands. Next to come in is Mawile, who lands an Intimidate, meaning I have to Swords Dance again. In retaliation, Mawile just goes for an Iron Defense, which is pretty fortunate. Next turn, Opal asks us another question, which we once again answer correctly. This gives us a buff to our defenses, and now it's time to attack. Rathalos goes for a Dig and dodges a Draining Kiss in the process. On the next turn, the Dig lands, and then Rathalos gets hit by a Draining Kiss. Next 2 turns is another Dig just to take out Mawile, and next comes Togekiss. Once again, I answer Opal's question correctly, which gives me a buff to my attack stats. This allows me to one-shot Togekiss with a Poison Jab, and last to come out is Alcremie. But as Alcremie Gigantamaxes, all the buffs make it so that Rathalos can just one-shot with a Poison Jab regardless of the Dynamax. And with that, we defeat the 5th gym and receive the Fairy type badge. We're doing pretty good. On our way to the next gym, we have to take a stop at Hammerlock to find Bede wallowing hiding in his depression? You're the one who committed the crime, bro. I don't know why you're so sad. Anyways, Opal harasses him for a little bit and then is off to the next city. And that next city is Sirchester. And once we arrive, of course, we have to go clothes shopping once again. There wasn't much here, but here's what we got for now. Anyways, now it's time to head to the gym to face Gordie and his rock types. Gordie leads with Barbarical while I lead with Raihan. Turn 1, I go for a grab apple and immediately knock out Barbarical in one hit. Once he goes down, next to come out is Shuckle. On Shuckle, I decide to switch out to the goat, who gets hit by his power split from Shuckle. This ends up averaging the attack stats of both Pokemon, which neuters the goat's damage just a little bit. Next turn I go for a liquidation that does about a third of damage to Shuckle. Shuckle goes for a weak rock tomb that lowers the speed, but it's not really that important. I have leftovers also means that goat won't be taking too much damage from the Shuckle. I realize that the goat isn't doing nearly enough damage as I hope so I switch out to Rathalos next turn. On the switch in, he takes a weak rock tomb that lowers the speed, but again, it doesn't matter, it's a Shuckle. On the next turn, an Iron Tail fortunately lands, taking down Shuckle in a single hit. Next to come out is Stonejourner. I decide to take another swap back to the goat, while Stonejourner just sets up a Stealth Rocks. A liquidation next turn brings Stonejourner down to about half, while he just lands another rock tomb. Because of that speed drop, I'm slower, but Stonejourner just sets up a Wonder Rune. Next turn, liquidation fortunately hits the damage roll and knocks out Stonejourner. Next is Gordie's ace, Colossal. He Gigantamaxes right away, and I go for Protect to stall a turn of Dynamax. Protect still isn't enough to stop the Volcalith though, which is a very good move by the way. G-Max Volcalith being up means that whatever active Pokemon I have in will take a sixth of his health bar every single turn. That means this war of attrition will be tough. Since I think another Volcalith is coming, I switch out to Barroth, who resists the rock type move. I guess right, however, due to Stealth Rocks, the damage of the move, and the G-Max Volcalith, I'm still left at half HP. Despite this, I should still be able to take one non-crit, so I Protect next turn. Colossal goes for a Max Flare, which does no damage on the Protect. However, this does set up the Sun, meaning any water type moves won't do enough damage to knock him out. So I'm gonna have to stall even through the insane chip. Barroth is too low on HP, so I try to switch in Rathalos, but I didn't realize how much damage a Heat Crash in the Sun would do, and even though Rathalos does survive the initial Heat Crash, he cannot survive the Volcalith who will take him down in between turns. It always sucks to lose your starter, but this one hurt just a bit more. The trooper who stuck out the early game, and the man who carried us through the Fairy Gym. You will be missed. But we have a battle to win. Next, I send in Goat. He still can't go for liquidation because of the Sun, so I have to stall a little bit. I go for Protect to stall a Sun turn, and fortunately, the Volcalith is gone, meaning the leftovers recovery is free and permanent. Next turn, I go for a Psychic Fangs that does no damage even through a crit, while Colossal lands a strong Rock Tomb that brings Goat down into the yellow. However, after leftovers recovery, we should still survive one more through a crit. Just to be safe though, I still use another Protect turn, obviously because of the Sun, but to also get some recovery back. And finally, on this turn, the Sun ends, which means a liquidation next turn is enough to take down Colossal in one final hit. Sucks that we lost someone, especially since I think it was probably avoidable, but at least we won a battle without using stupid setup spam. But that empty team slot is soon replaced, as now that we have the surfing upgrade on our Rotom bike, we're able to find a Hakamo'o in a den in Axew's Eye. I name her Kuluyaku, and she is way more than a worthy replacement for Rathalos. She has a pretty solid typing and really good coverage, meaning she'll be really helpful in a lot of parts of this upcoming endgame. Another solid upgrade we get is Barroth evolving into a Flygon. That'll be super useful later. But with that out of the way, it's off to Spikemuth to face off against Piers and his dark types. His battle is unique for a very cool lore reason, as he doesn't respect Chairman Rose's antics and decides to keep his gym on a non-power spot. This means neither of us can Dynamax. Anyways, that's enough yapping. Piers leads with Scrafty while I lead with Kuluyaku. However, I didn't really realize he had Intimidate, so I have to switch out right away to Goat. He just takes a weak Fake Out on the switch in, and next turn he lands a Liquidation. Scrafty retaliates with a pointless Sand Attack, as next turn I switch out to Paolumu. This is a very scary situation, as Paolumu gets crit on the switch in, leaving him at very low HP. Next turn it's back to Kuluyaku, who takes minimal damage on a payback. Next turn Kuluyaku sets up a Dragon Dance, while Scrafty goes for a Brick Break that does a decent bit of damage. I set up another Dragon Dance, knowing that a non-crit wouldn't kill me, hoping to get him to proc a Citrus Berry. But instead he just goes for a Sand Attack, which is really giving me flashbacks to Lieutenant Surge back on my first video. And those especially haunt me as I miss a Brick Break next turn. Scrafty lands another Sand Attack, which is really gonna start to piss me off. Fortunately, Kuluyaku locks in next turn and lands the Brick Break to take down Scrafty. Next to come in Malamar, who is 4 times weak to X-Scissor, and down it goes immediately. Next to come out is Obstagoon. Sadly, Kuluyaku misses another Brick Break, but fortunately, Obstagoon goes for a counter that would have killed if it somehow survived. Obstagoon then goes for an Obstruct, which lowers my defense by 2 stages, and I realize it's time to switch out. I switch out to Barroth on a counter that still doesn't work, and then Obstagoon obstructs again. So it's another switch out back to Kuluyaku on another counter that still doesn't work. I attempt to read the obstruct with a Dragon Dance, but of course the AI just cheats and hits me with a weak Shadow Claw that still wouldn't have killed even if it crit. A Citrus Berry just heals off the damage that I just took. I thought that +1 would be enough to take down Obstagoon, who is 4 times weak to a Brick Break, but I guess not being fully evolved does bite us in the butt sometimes. A counter would have been devastating here as we would have lost Kuluyaku, but fortunately it just goes for another weak Shadow Claw. Finally, Obstagoon just tries to stall with Obstruct, but he can't delay the inevitable, and next turn Brick Break is able to take down Obstagoon, and next to come out is Skuntank. I switch out to Barroth on a Skuntank, who just goes for a Sucker Punch that fails. And finally, an Earthquake is all it takes to take down Skuntank in 1 hit and win us the battle. With that, we win us the 7th gym badge. With the new level cap, we're finally able to get some new evolutions. First is Kuluyaku becoming a Kommo-o, and next is Paolumu finally becoming a Noivern. And after a short trip, it's time to face Raihan in Hammerlock City. His battle is really cool, as instead of being a single battle, it's a double battle. But little does he know, I do like playing VGC on my off time, so it's time to beat him up. He leads with Gigalith and Flygon, while I lead with Barroth and Kuluyaku. On turn 1, their Flygon outspeeds us, letting a Breaking Swipe that doesn't deal too much damage despite being super effective, because spread moves deal 75% damage. It does lower our attack, but that's not that big of an issue. On Kuluyaku's turn, I use Clanging Scales to deal damage to both Flygon and Gigalith, and also give myself a +1 special attack boost from our held Throat Spray, which buffs our special attack whenever we use a sound-based move. On Barroth's turn, it just takes down Flygon with a Dragon Claw, and Jigglyth just sets up a pointless Stealth Rocks. To explain my strategy a little bit, that Jigglyth's kinda useless, so I can kinda just let it sit on the field. With Flygon gone, in comes Sandaconda. However, an Earth Power from Flygon and a Clanging Scales takes down the Sandaconda immediately. The Jigglyth does go for Body Press, which is kinda scary due to the defense drops, but we don't get crit, so we survive. Next to come in on the Sandaconda spot is Raihan's final Pokemon and ace, Duraludon. The little guy becomes a really big guy really quickly, but just as quickly as he became big, a critical hit Earth Power takes it down and it becomes small again. This wasn't supposed to happen, but it would have gone down in 1 turn anyways, as Kuluyaku goes for a Clanging Scales, taking down Jigglyth and winning us the 8th gym badge. With that, we defeat the gym challenge and it's off to Winden. On the way there, Guides McGorm becomes a Zweilous. Pretty cute, I must say. And finally, we arrive in Winden. But first, it's time to get a couple new upgrades. In Lake of Outrage, we find Nergigante the Dreepy. And, ignore the level cap by the way, I'm stupid I know, he immediately becomes a Dracloak. And on Route 10, we find Basarios the Duraludon. He's our final encounter, but definitely not a useless one. And as I prepare for the end of the game, here is the final 6 Pokemon that we will be taking into the most important section of our Pokemon Sword journey. I will be using the portable PC though. But of course, that most important section is shopping. You know I had to get a fire fit for the tournament, bruh. Come on, man. Anyways, it's time for the actual tournament. First off on our tournament run to become champion is Marnie. She leads with Liepard while I lead with Kuluyaku. Turn 1, Liepard goes for Torment, which is actually kinda scary since it won't allow us to set up really easily. Kuluyaku just goes for a Sword Stance, so I try to delay a bit by going for Poison Jab, but before it could come out, Liepard goes for a Nasty Plot, but Poison Jab just kills anyways. Next to come out is Scrafty, who fortunately doesn't have Intimidate. This means a single Drain Punch is enough to take her down in 1 hit. Next to come out is Toxicroak. I go for Clanging Scales since it resists my other 2 moves, while Toxicroak just lands a Toxic. Next turn Marnie heals, but a critical hit Drain Punch brings Toxicroak back down to 1 HP. This means next turn a Poison Jab can kill Toxicroak and we can move on. Next to come out is Morpeko, and I decide to go for a Sword Stance because being at +2 means I won't be able to kill the next Pokemon to come in after Morpeko. She just lands a Soft Spark that wouldn't have killed even through a crit. While we are kinda low because of the Toxic, a Drain Punch is able to knock out Morpeko and heal us back up to full HP. Last to come out from Marnie is Grimmsnarl, who will Dynamax, however a poison jab is enough to take it down in one hit and win us the first round. Next up is the final battle with our rival Hop. He leads with double, while once again I lead with Kuluyaku. Turn 1 I set up a sword stance, while double goes for a cotton guard. Next turn I set up another sword stance, while double just lands an extremely weak Zen headbutt. Next turn a drain punch kills a double and we regain our full HP back. Next to come out is a very scary Corviknight. However, with that great coverage I said, a thunder punch is able to take down Corviknight in one hit. Next to come out is Snorlax, who also goes down in a single drain punch. After Snorlax is Pincurchin, who goes down in a single drain punch as well. Last to come out is Inteleon, who Dynamaxes right away and lands a max Hailstorm that would not have killed, fortunately, even if it crit. And with that, a single thunder punch is all it takes to take down Inteleon in one hit. With that, we defeat our rival and we win the second round. This means we're off to the semifinals to compete and finally face off against the champion. But before we could get to finals day, Leon gets like kidnapped or something by Chairman Rose, so we gotta go find him. In Rose Tower, we ride an elevator, fighting a bunch of trainers along the way until we reach the top. Once we reach the top though, we find Alina, who is determined to make sure that nobody interferes with Chairman Rose's business. So she challenges us to a battle. She leads with Frostlass while I lead with Paolumu. With a held choice specs, I'm able to one-shot the Frostlass with a flamethrower from Paolumu. Next to come out is Salazzle. I switch out to the goat, who takes a toxic on the switch in, but he'll be fine because he is the literal goat. Next turn a Venoshock does a decent bit amount of damage, but a liquidation is enough to take her down in one hit. Next to come in is the Queen Sarina. I switch out to Paolumu, who takes a critical hit acrobatics, but is fine anyways. A choice specs boosted flamethrower is able to bring down Sarina to a very low HP. This means Sarina can land in a track and Paolumu falls in love with her. But fortunately, Paolumu is no simp and is able to overcome the love and take down Sarina next turn. Next to come out is Milotic, and Kuluyaku walls her, so I decide to send her in and Swords Dance up. After setting up 3 Swords Dances taking very minimal damage, a Thunder Punch takes down Milotic, and an Earthquake is able to take down the G-Max Garbodor that comes out next. And with that, Alina is defeated. I need a woman who will fight for me the way she fights for Rose. After that, we find Leon and Chairman Rose having a nice conversation while Chairman Rose sounds like he's doing a villain monologue. Whatever though, at least we found Leon and it's time for the finals day. But before we're able to kick things off, Bede decides to break the rules and run out onto the field and challenge us to a battle. I guess he's the new fairy type gym leader, who would have thought. He leads with Mawile while I lead with Basarios. An Intimidate brings down our attack, but that's nothing a couple Sword Stances can't fix. Turn 1 is a Sword Stance while Mawile goes for a Play Rough. Turn 2 goes the exact same way, however Basarios eats a Citrus Berry bringing his health back up, and on turn 3 an Iron Head is able to one-shot Mawile. Next up is Gardevoir, who also goes down to a single Iron Head. Next to come out is Galarian Rapidash, and we risk a crit trying to go for an Iron Head that's slower, but of course I'm so good and we're never punished. Last to come in is Hatterene, who goes really big, but then gets one-shot by an Iron Head. And with that, we defeat Bede, and it's actually time to start the semifinals. And so, our first trainer up is Nessa. I find it odd that no trainers from the gym challenge are in the semifinals, but whatever I guess. Nessa leads with Golisopod while I lead with Kuluyaku. Kuluyaku goes for a Sword Stance turn 1, while Golisopod thinks he's like me and goes for a Sword Stance of his own. But Kuluyaku just laughs in his face and one-shots him with a Thunder Punch. Next to come out is Pelipper, who sets up the rain with Drizzle. But this isn't really for Pelipper, as we one-shot Pelipper with Thunder Punch. The real threat is the Barraskewda that comes in next turn. With Swift Swim, that means he's faster, and an Ice Fang Freeze here could be devastating, but fortunately we dodge it, and a Thunder Punch is enough to take him down. Next is a Seaking, who also has Swift Swim, but it's a Seaking. So one more Sword Stance means we can guarantee the fight, and Seaking goes down to a single Thunder Punch. Last to come in is Dreadnought, who has an awesome Gigantamax form, might I say, but he too falls to a close combat, and that's the end of the battle. With Nessa out of the way, that means we win the quarterfinals of the semifinals. Kinda odd, but whatever I guess. Next to come up is the fighting gym leader Bea. She leads with Hawlucha, while I lead with a unique lead in Nergigante. You see, here we're able to take advantage of Hawlucha's limited moveset in 2 fighting moves and 1 flying move. But that 1 flying move being bounced leaves a huge hole. Turn 1, Nergigante goes for a Dragon Dance, while Hawlucha just springs into the sky. On the second turn, we Dragon Dance while Hawlucha just comes down on top of us. And unfortunately, while this would have never killed even through a crit, a paralysis could mean a problem. Next turn is one last Dragon Dance, while Hawlucha springs into the sky once again, and next turn Nergigante is able to Baton Pass pass out into Raihan. And well, you might be thinking, Raihan's a grass type, bounce is gonna do a lot of damage. Well, that's covered, as a held Koba berry means even a crit wouldn't kill Raihan ever. That also uses up Raihan's held item, meaning that he can use a 110 base power acrobatics to sweep the rest of the fight. First of all is Hawlucha, then it's the incoming Phalanx, after that is Grapple Locked, then sadly once again Surfetched, then lastly the Gigantamax Machamp. And with that we win the semifinals of the semifinals. Last up is Raihan, who has no double battle shenanigans this time. He leads with Torkoal while I lead with Kuliaku. Of course, I start by setting up a Swords Dance, while Torkoal goes for a weak body press. Next turn is another Swords Dance, and another weak body press. And at +4 attack, an Earthquake takes down Torkoal in one hit. Next to come out is Turtonator, who goes down in a single Dragon Claw. Next is Flygon, who also goes down in a single Dragon Claw. Next is Goodra, who, you guessed it, goes down in a single Dragon Claw. Last to come out is Duraludon. He does his really cool Gigantamax, but then goes down to a single Earthquake. And with Raihan defeated, we complete the semifinals and finally earn the chance to destroy Leon in the finals. And as we walk out and prepare for the battle, Chairman Rose appears on the Jumbotron. This time he gives his real evil villain monologue, while insane amounts of Dynamax energy just starts shooting out from the ground in all the different cities. I guess Piers was right. Anyways, you know the drill, time to go save the world. In the Slumbering Weald, we find Zacian and Zamazenta once again, and we also get the Rusted Sword and Shield. Get it? Like the names of the games? And so we head back to Hammerlock to face off against the evil Chairman Rose. He gives this whole spiel about bringing back Eternatus and whatnot, whatever, let's just battle. He leads with his Cavalier while I lead with once again Kuliaku. I set up a Swords Dance on turn 1, and he also sets up a Swords Dance on turn 1. So I go for a Fire Punch just to not deal with him and get him out of the way. Next to come out is Ferrothorn. Here I get another chance to go for another Swords Dance, while Ferrothorn just sets up a Curse. Silly Ferrothorn, setups are for me. A Fire Punch does him in, but not without leaving a little bit of damage from Iron Barbs. Next to come out is Berserker, who goes down in a single close combat. Next is Kling Clang, who also goes down in a single close combat. Last to come out is Kaparaja, who Gigantamaxes and admittedly has a pretty lame one. So we remove it from this world and close combat it, one-shotting it and taking it down immediately. And with that, we defeat Chairman Rose, but unfortunately have not yet saved the world. We still have to deal with Eternatus. We meet him on the roof and find out that he beat Leon up. What the heck? So the clear next step is to send him after me? What are we thinking here? If the champion can't do it, why can I? Anyways, we engage in battle and then defeat him, but then he starts freaking out and flies into the sky and becomes a giant hand. And I want you guys to know, I don't want to mess with this thing at all. Look at these base stats, bro. Imagine if this was accessible in the actual game. Anyways, we're able to stall out long enough until Hop has the brilliant idea to waste our rested weapons. This resurrects Zacian and Zamazenta, I think, and then calls them forth to help us in this battle. And like I said, I'm not messing with those base stats, bro. So I just sit back and let the other three do all the dirty work, and eventually we take down Eternatus VMAX. They force us to catch it, and technically it is a dragon type, but no legendary, so it's gonna rot in the box. But with that, we save the world, and after a couple days, it's finally time to face the champion Leon. This battle, by the way, has by far one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in any Pokemon game ever. Anyways, enough yap. He leads with Aegislash while I lead with Nergigante, who has become a Dragapult, by the way. Turn 1 he goes for a King's Shield, while I go for a Dragon Dance. Next turn, I set up another Dragon's Dance, while Aegislash goes for a Shadow Ball. Nergigante hangs on at 1 HP due to a held Focus Sash, and next turn he gets on out of there with a Baton Pass out to Kuliaku. Kuliaku tanks the Shadow Ball and sets up another Swords Dance in front of the Aegislash. This is still safe as even a critical hit would not have knocked out Kuliaku. Next turn, a Fire Punch takes down Aegislash, and next to come out is Haxorus. Haxorus goes down to an Outrage, and next comes Dragapult. He too also goes down to the Outrage, and unfortunately the Outrage ends early. However, the confusion is no problem as a held Lumberry cures it. Next to come out is Cinderace, who goes down to a single Rock Tomb, and next is Seismitoad. Here I have to click Outrage so that Seismitoad could go down in one hit, and out comes the final Charizard. Charizard Gigantamaxes into his really awesome form that Game Freak just really loves to keep giving to Charizards, but Game Freak's golden child still goes down to a single Outrage, winning us the challenge. This challenge was really fun, even though it was majority a bunch of setups. If I ever redo this game, I'll really try to do it as much as I can without Dynamax, but I think Dynamax sets up for a better experience than spamming setup moves. But either way, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you stuck around for this entire long video to hear this, you're the reason why I want to continue to make more videos and hopefully make better content. My next video will probably take a long time to come out again, but just know I've been trying to do it for at least a couple months. Anyways, remember to leave a like and subscribe, and maybe a comment or two, but most importantly, have a wonderful day.